Well, folks, let's start off the series. Again, welcome and thank you for joining on a Friday, and thank you for continuing on the webinar series. And this is going to be part 2. For those that don't know me, my name is Orlando Ferrer with Informed Decisions. This is part 2 of our 4-part series, so in the month of February. We'll be doing this every Friday during February for about 20-30 minutes. We're going to keep it to that time slot just to keep everyone free. We know everyone's busy, so let's just we'll keep things rolling. This is being recorded. Last session was recorded as well. Our marketing guys did get that up to YouTube. After the webinar today, I will be sending out a link to that recording. So sorry about the delay. I was hoping to get that out during the week, and it just didn't work out. And after this session, we will have we'll be answering questions. So if you have any questions along the way, just please feel free to send them over using your question chat box, and I will be answering those. And we'll just kind of get started here. So here we are, part 2 of our learning series, and this is continuation of our projects that we're going to start from top to bottom, all the way from start to end. And today we're going to be covering our design and mapping, and we're going to be talking also about the engine logic, which will be a setup for part 3, and where we're going to actually work with the engines and the automation that go along with this project. So we're just going to go down that road. Again, we're going to be reviewing the design, the mapping, and the logic of the engine. And today we're just going to start off with actually talking about we're just going to touch a little upon what we talked about last week a little, and everyone recognized this from last time. This is our form design. We do have a few people that are here today that weren't here last night, so I'm just going to briefly talk about this. This is our form design, which we created using our designer. You can use any designer you want, or design software that you want. You can use Word, Excel. You can grab this from PDF. It doesn't really matter too much for us as long as you can use this creatively and work this out. So this is the final product that we actually came up with in our design and mapping. Kept it light, airy. We actually have some features in here that are dynamically inserted, like our little marketing advertising that goes out with this invoice for next month, and that's triggered based on the month of February, and we'll show you how to do that. We actually have a QR code, which is helpful for incoming when somebody else, or your receiving person, receives this document that actually has information like the invoice number, invoice date, terms, and so on. We actually made the field so this bill to ship area fits right at the window of a window envelope, as well as this return address will fit also on that window envelope as well. And we have some nice features in here, like if you go at the top of the features, we give ample space for our invoice number tagline here to be picked up by a capture piece, like when you're actually inserting this invoice or this document into a capture piece for AP automation. And we give enough space on the edges so this could be an anchor for the actual data that they need, which is the actual invoice number. So just a couple of little features that we've talked about to keep this clean. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, or haven't seen part 1 of this series, you'll get more information out of that. So right now we're going to actually talk and actually get into a little of the design. This is our designer that we have, and you can this is the finished product that we came up with. And I'm just going to lightly talk about this just one more, just kind of get into it a little. I'm going to open up a canvas here. And again, for those folks that went around, we're going to insert an image. We'll put in a logo. We're going to make that proportional. We can scale that image that's going to be brought in this object, so it scales proportionally within that object. So when we move it around on our canvas, it stretches out, it condenses, it moves around. It's a nice little logo that we can play around with. We can make boxes, we can make squares, we can make rectangles, we can hold the shift key to make a perfect square. So all different things that we can do in there, including circles as well. So combining these parts together, you can actually create a whole form. So this is essentially just adding all these things together. We actually came up with the form that happy Friday. that we actually created as a finished product. So you can get creative, draw around, and put things anywhere you want. Part one had a little more about this, so I'm not going to get too caught up on this because we have a lot of ground to cover with the mapping. Bottom line is that if we're happy with our design, in this case, we want to bring this into our mapping side of the house. And we're actually using a tool that we've created called IMAP, which is a graphical user interface that will help us take the data from a spoof file and put it onto this form at locations that we want this to be in. Again, you can, if you're doing this in Word, PDF, Excel, doesn't matter. You can use this from anywhere. All you have to do is just print to the iDocs driver, hit OK, and that's going to bring in our IMAP utility. So now this design is flat. You can't change it. It's a flat design, and we can look at it and move it around if we wanted to. And on the left-hand panel is our design. On the right-hand panel is empty, and what we're going to do is actually we're going to connect to our IBMI, which we're going to do right here. We're going to search for a spoof file that we want to work with, specifically with this document. In this case, I'm going to an OutQ that I have. It's going to bring me a list of all the different OutQs that I have. I'm going to select one just by highlighting it. As long as I highlight anywhere on that row, it will select that specific spoof file. I'm going to hit download, and we'll have, because this is a multi-page spoof file, it's going to let me know that do I want all the pages or some of them, so I can actually say only give me page 1 or give me whatever page. This comes in handy if you're dealing with spoof file that's very large, like a 500-page spoof file, and you only want a few pages out of it. Also, we can actually designate if we want 2 pages of a spoof file to be represented as 1 page. This does come in handy sometimes when you're doing multiple pages as onto one document, and that's a whole class by itself, but we do give that option here. We're going to hit OK, and now on our right hand side we have our spoof file being represented here. So simply to map a field, all we're going to do is just click, drag along, and some of you guys have, well, a lot of you have already done this, so this may be repetitive, but we got to start somewhere. And we're going to get to more complex items right here. We put it into our location, and we can manipulate this map field, as we call it. We can say, well, we're going to fit that in there. We're going to mess around with the actual sizing of it. We're going to mess around with the line spacing by pulling it down. If we want to, we can actually right-click on it, go to properties, and here we actually have different types of map fields. Our standard or normal map field, which is what we're messing around with. These other features are when you're doing smart routing settings, and we'll get to that as well later on. We're going to go into the properties. This section right here tells us exactly where we're selecting that data from the spoof file. So we're grabbing it from row 14 to row 16. From columns 2 to column 34. So any data that's in that area, in those specific coordinates, will get picked up by this map field. And we can actually give it a specific, name that we want. So we say this is the build to address block. That's just for our purposes to be able to identify it later on. There we go. Helps if I can spell. We can change the font sizing. We can rotate this around if we wanted to be on a 90-degree, 180, or 270 angle. We can actually give it color if we wanted to as well, so we can give that a specific color to that text that prints out. And we'll talk about some of the map features, but this is basically based on X and Y coordinates on where it is going to be located on the page in the document. And one of the things we're going to be talking about is doing a conditional map field. So we're going to add some conditions whether or not we want this data to print or not. And we'll get to that point as well. We can automatically handle the actual line spacing, the space between lines. So we can actually increase that or decrease it. We can do that automatically by pulling down on our little tab at the bottom of the map field. Or we can select an actual, unselect the automatic and select if we want to buy DPIs based on line spacings or lines per inch. So we actually have some options in doing that. And if we wanted this if we wanted to burst each page of the spool file, we can select the yes option and tell it in what sequence we want that to be in. And what that would do is burst, if this is a multiple page spool file, what it would look for is that to keep the data that's similar on this map field together. So if this was an invoice number, a customer number, then, and you had 3 pages of a customer number in the spool file, it would group those together to process those as one. It just helps to bundle customers together or invoice together. So if you have a multi-page invoice, you can burst them all together. All right. That's a basic map field. Notice it did change colors like we told it to. We're going to do a couple more examples here. I'm just going to go into some of the columns. And this is stuff that people just get a little tied up on. I'm just going to put a couple columns down. I'm just going to randomly just throw them in there because I'm really not going to worry too much about the positionings until I get some more data in there. I'm going to expand this out. I'm going to just put this stuff out there. And one of the things I like to do is I like to see the edges of my map fields. I'll go into the options. I'll select the map field borders and actually put some borders around that. Those won't print. They just will show up here when we're working with the map fields. I can actually lay this out the way I want to, put it right between my columns. I'm not going to worry too much if they're lined up on the height. One of the nice features about this is the automatic alignment, and we can select each map field. If we hold the control button while selecting it, we'll select all 3 objects or map fields. Notice I selected the last one, the quantity column being my last one that I selected. If I go to the align option or pull down menu and I align to the top, it will align to the top of the last object I selected. It's a nice easy way of making things line up. You can do that to the size, in all sorts of different areas. Notice also this column right here. Maybe I want this really to be centered. I'm going to justify this map field or the text within this map field, because notice in the spool file it's not really it's justified to the left, but I want this to be centered, or I want this to be to the right. And I can just actually say I want this to be justified to the right. It just makes it another tool. Instead of having to do programming changes, it just gives you another tool to make this slightly change the way you want this to work out for you. You can center it or just make it back to neutral. So you have some options on how you want that to come out or be displayed. Okay. Essentially, I'm going to pull out what we've done. This is the basic mapping of what we do. You could do the whole form that way. Just select your information, drag it over, and put it down. And I'm going to go back here. I'm going to open up something that we've done. Then I'm going to come back to this here a second. So I'm going to go back to the finished product, which we've done right here. And this is the finished product showing all the outlines and everything that we've done along the whole map field, or the mapping of this form. And you see it that we actually have our data here. We have all the data that, this kind of looks like more like the finished form that we were just looking at. One of the things that you don't see in here is our barcodes. Remember, we had a QR code for the finished product. In here, we're going to actually add that barcode. And what we did to do that, on the right-hand side, I actually have on this row right here, which is row 10, I have a bunch of information all grouped together. I have an invoice number, I have an invoice date, I have the terms, I have the customer number. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to map that whole pile together. And I'm just going to come to my left. Come on. There we go. I'm going to take, we'll work that out here in a second. I'm going to put all that in here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on it, and notice I missed one column. I'm actually going to say I really want that to get picked up by column 2 to column 93, because there's a whole bunch of information, and I'm going to call this is going to be my QR code. And what I'm going to do initially is just set this up. I'm going to place it where I want this. This is based on the top left-hand corner of this map field. Notice it goes off. When I upload this to the IBMI, the next step I'm actually going to do is go into my form application, and this is our iDocs main menu. We're going to actually be working with forms and reports. And I'm going to go into that actual form application, and we'll get more into that form application itself. I'm actually going to select to work with actual map fields, and I'm going to select that with 1. The difference on this one is going to be that I'm actually going to select, using this portion of the map field, I'm going to change this around. I'm going to add this feature. You can't do this on IMAP. This is called scalable barcodes, and I'm actually just go in there with an F4. I'm going to select the options that I want for a barcode, and this is going to be the option I want in QR code. So I've selected that. I can actually tell it what size I want that to be, and for certain barcodes, if I was doing like a 3 of 9 or code 128, I can say if I want that information to be readable. So once I actually upload the information into my iDocs software into the IBMI, I can go into the map field and say, okay, I want you to be a specific type of barcode, which is scalable. And that's how easy it is to just set up the barcode. And ultimately, that's what we'll get. This is that data right there. All that data that we did for that map field would be in this barcode right here. And if you look at it, if I go to the next page, notice the barcode changes because it's different data. So it's that simple to actually create a barcode. Same thing with a regular barcode that we did in the bottom of that form, which is going to be the code 128. It's option 1, and this, because we wanted this barcode to be a specific size, this is the size right there, very specific. We actually told it to be only 0.2 of an inch high and the width of being 0.020 on the width, and it gives us that specific size. We can change this around, we can make it taller, wider, we can mess with this. So this is great when you're dealing with packing slips, or if you're dealing with items that need very specific spot or need to fit in boxes. This is great to mess around with on the scalable barcode. A lot of options on it. Okay. So that's the barcode option on the mapping. Now, one of the things that and this, you get the whole scalable barcode options, you got the basic mapping that we just did. One of the things that we run into all the time is, and people get tripped up on this quite a bit actually, is adding a condition to a map field. And in our spoof file that we were working with originally, this is an image of that spoof file that we have in there. I'm just going to make that a little bigger here, just so everyone can see that a little better. So this spoof file information that we have that we're working with, this is page 1 up here on the very top. It has 10 lines, and we want to select our total section so we can actually get a map field so that appears in this spot right here. So we're going to select all 4 lines. We're going to line those up, do the line spacing so they appear here in this section. Now, one of the things that happens when we're looking at this, again, this is 10 lines, then this is 5 lines. What's going to happen is this whole block of information is still in the same columns. It's between columns 63 and 93. However, the row in which they are located in move. So more lines of items on the top, it moves this whole section down to row 93 between 43. And then if you have less, it moves this whole block up to row 34 to 38. So how do you actually capture that, that map field? How do you actually deal with that? And the answer is adding a condition to the map field. And I did this a little more on the side of just, here's my point again, just showing map field, for those that didn't see it, starts at this point, and then for a invoice that actually has less rows, it moves up. And what I actually did with that is actually added a map field or a condition to that map field. So if I was actually in IMAP and I'm actually going to grab that information, and I'm going to show this in here slightly different. Let me bring in my other map field. Oh, I must have got rid of that. Let me just bring that back in. Sorry, guys. We'll just do this very quickly. It goes pretty quick once you get a hang of it. Going to bring in my spool file. So if my information in my spool file is down here, and I actually want to move that to my area on the total section, I'm moving kind of quick on this one because I'm going to run out of time today, but just moving a little quick. If anybody needs more detailed on this, we'll get into it. I'm going to line that up where I want this to be. I'm just going to roughly line this up because I'm going to run out of time. And what I actually would do is right-click on this, and I'm going to add a condition. And this is the map field conditions right down here. And we're going to add a condition to say, if I see the condition, then print it. If I don't do it. And to illustrate that, I actually created this right here to show you what the logic is behind that. So if I actually have my data right here, and what I want to print is actually from row 40 to 43 in this space right here that I just selected them as a map field. This is going to be on this first row here. This first row is going to be my first map field, and the column stays the same. It's going to be between 84 and 93. However, my row is going to be between 40 and 43. This is my actual map field where the information is on the spool file, and that represents this portion down here. The next one is I actually place that on a location on the document. Notice I put that on the boxes on the bottom left. This is going to be the X and Y coordinates for my actual location where that's being placed on the paper. And the trigger on the map field, which I brought up, I'm going to do a trigger saying, look at row 39, which is going to be the top row here above it, and between column 64 and 74, which is from the Y to the L, if it equals your total, and that's a true statement, then print the information between 40 and 43, which is represented by what we selected on the map field, and put it on the X and Y coordinates that I have here. And to illustrate that, what I did is, just to show you, there's actually a little shortcut to this, but just to illustrate the point, I actually created 6 map fields. The conditions are almost the same. The locations are absolutely the same because we always wanted to print in the same exact location. But what I did is I did a second map field showing that, okay, I'm just going to do the next row down. I'm going to do between 39 and 42, 38 to 41. And I added the similar logic to the map, to the trigger on that, saying I'm actually going to say, okay, I'm going to test on 39, then I'm going to test on row 38. So as that block of information moves up and down, goes up and down, it's actually doing the same test for each row. And if it's a valid test, then it prints that information, that block information. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's how we actually can get our document, our finished document, to say when we actually have more lines, individual lines, we can actually say, yeah, it's going to print correctly. Or if we have less lines, it's still going to print correctly because it's doing the test on those 6 lines, saying, yeah, do you see your totals? And if it does, it prints it. If it doesn't put it on there. That's how we actually get to select moving data that's going up and down on our page in our form. Okay, for those that want to see it actually on here, the calculations is pretty easy on that one right there. So I'm just going to say it was, do this off memory here, it was on row 39 between, was it 64 and 75 equals your space total. If I could type, that'd be great. And that's the simple That's the whole thing for that one. Now, one of the shortcuts, remember I did say I could do a shortcut on this. So what actually I can do as a shortcut is instead of doing 6 individual map fields, I could do one map field, and instead of putting the individual row, there's a little shortcut that says star current row. And what this will do is it will look at the current row of the map field. So I can actually say, okay, I'm going to go from, oh, what were my rows again? I forgot, I blanked out on that. I can actually go from row 40 down to 35 and not have to do the individual map field. So I can go from, let's go 35 to 40. That's an example. So in this case, I'm going to grab all the way from 35 down to 40, between the columns stay the same, and it's going to apply that condition on the current row, and it's going to do the test for every current row. So you only have to do one map field. In our test, just to illustrate the point, I actually went in and created several. Let me just go in there into the map fields on the green screen so you see this. So actually, I just wanted to illustrate the point. Again, I actually did a total section as well. Again, different rows, same columns. I just moved that down the series. So I could do the same thing. Instead of creating all these different map fields, I just can do one and do the star current row. Okay, that's adding conditions to a map field. That's actually a very powerful tool that will help a lot of people just get to what they want and where they want on the mapping. And we did that for 2 areas. We did that for the totals due, because the totals due is in my, it's down here. It's the last section down here. And I did it for the totals block itself. So 2 different places that we're able to apply actually conditional items to the mapping. Okay. We're getting close to the end of time here, so we're trying to keep it. I do want to talk about the next part, which is going to be the logic of engines, and this is where we're going to take it next. So after we're done with this, and let's say we're done and happy with the actual mapping, the next step is actually to be done. We're done with our design. We're done with our mapping. We're going to send this up to the IBMI by selecting the upload arrow. And in this case, I'm just going to say, give it a name. Oh, if I can type. I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to upload a couple of things. I'm going to upload the form design. I'm going to upload the mapping instructions, and I'm going to create a form application, which is really the container holding those instructions that we just created, the design and the mapping. And we're just going to say, okay, that's going to upload it to the IBMI. It's done. And if I come up here, I get out of it, come back in, do a little quick search. There is my new form application that I just created with the mapping and all the instructions and design as well. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful on that side. What I want to do next is, because in the next minute of time that we have here, is actually go into our engines and the logic of engines. This is going to be a setup for next time. The actual information is important. This is going to be for the automation portion of what we need to add. Pretty much across the board, and this is done intentionally to keep the logic very similar, very easy to understand. No matter if you're using the iDocs engine, if you're using the iMail engine, if you're using Smart Routing engine, if you're using iView, no matter what it is, this is the same logic overall. We're going to monitor an out queue. We're monitoring a out queue for a spoof file to be ready and available. We're going to do a test. In a lot of cases, we're going to look at a spoof file attribute, if it's the user data, the form type, if it's going to be the form name on the spoof file. We're going to look at those to do a test, and we're going to do a test by configuring a value. So if it's an invoice or if it's user data, we're going to say if it's invoice and the form is invoice, that's what we're going to do the test on. If that test is true, then it's going to move on to the next step. If the test is not true, then that spool file is just going to stay in that out queue that it went into. We are not going to move it. We're not going to do anything. But if it is true, we're going to move it to the next step, and that's going to work. Actually going to evoke an action. Action could be either merging it with an form application, an iView application, whatever application we have set up. We're going to take an action on it and move it on to the next step, which actually is outputting the results. If it's going to print, if it's going to email, if we're going to send it through smart routing to actually dynamically say if we're going to email it, print, fax, if we're going to send it to an out queue, or if we're going to send it to a next step. So we're going to actually do a output of the results from the merge of the application. And finally, since we started off with a spool file in the very beginning, we're going to send that spool file off to a different out queue or delete it. In our cases, 90% of the times we're going to hand that off to somewhere else for a next process. And this comes in handy. Notice my little design of a pipe here. This comes in handy when we're dealing with multiple engines. And when we're doing that is you can actually daisy chain a whole bunch of different engines together. So if we started with the Smart Router engine, which is a preprocessor of a spool file, so we can manipulate that spool file, we can feed that into the iDocs engine. We can feed that resulting spool file into the iView engine for processing and getting it up to the system. Maybe it goes out into the mail engine, the iMail engine, and also the iPDF monitor, which is monitoring an out queue to convert that output, that PCL output, into a PDF and put it into a directory. So you can daisy chain a whole bunch of engines because the logic on this is very similar. So you can just bounce that spool file to the next step, to the next step, and the next step. Okay, just wanted to get that in there. I know we are now officially out of time, so we're going to stop in there today. This is essentially the iDocs engine. I'll put that in there, up there. This will be in the recording. A lot of people seen this. This is essentially the whole step on detail that happens in the iDocs engines. We're going to get that to next week. We'll go over that next week in detail. And that's really it. We're going to really try to keep this between 20 and 30 minutes. If you have any questions after this and you want more information in detail, call me, send me an email. More than happy to slow it down and actually go with this, review this with you on one-on-one. More than happy to do that. A lot of information in a very short time. Next week, we're going to have part 3 of the series, and where we're going to go into the power of the iPDF monitor, and we're going to set up an iDocs engine and then set up the iPDF monitor engine and process an actual form through that process. And the following week, we'll get into the actual iMail engine as well, and we're going to put everything together and actually run a form through so you see the whole process working all together. All right. I'm going to send out the recording out to everyone once this is done. Next Friday, same time, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're going to keep it short. Send me an email. If you have any questions, call me. I'm more than happy to help out. And again, next week will be part 3 of 4 in our series, and we'll go from there. Thank you for being a good audience. Thank you for showing up. And please fill out your surveys if you haven't. For those people that filled out their surveys last week, thank you. Great information, great feedback. And this week, do the same. If you haven't filled out a survey, please do so. I'd like to hear from everyone. And maybe next week we'll share some of those comments along the way for everyone as well. All right. Thank you. Have a good Friday and a good weekend.